Okay, thank you, Orv, and good morning to everybody. I'm going to share the screen. I have some prepared slides. Oh, uh, Orv, I think you need to enable screen sharing for me here. Okay, thank you. All right. How's that, Orv? Have we got the AREDN Features 2020 slide up?
We do.
Okay, good. Thank you. Um, so I thought I'd cover this a little bit differently than I and several of us have done in the past. Uh, and you'll see why in a moment. I wanted to call attention to some of the best features of the AREDN project, and like most organizations, and certainly all volunteer organizations such as ours, the best features of the project are the people who make up the active project itself. And uh, why are we not? Okay. And so I wanted to introduce to you the team of people and what they've accomplished. And as we go through this, you'll see many of the features of the AREDN project, the firmware and features and functions that we've put into the project in recent times, many of which you may not be familiar with, and I'm hoping to get you to help you understand what some of these things are. First, you've heard from Andre K6AH. He's been our project manager now for well over 6 years. He's been really the spark plug and the inspiration for the project, and quite a diplomat and herding all the cats, as you can might imagine in a organization such as this. He's been a very frequent and eloquent speaker at regional and national conventions and even international venues such as the IARU Region 2 Emergency Communications Conference in Chile a couple of years ago. Most importantly, Andre's leadership has moved high-speed multimedia mesh networking from merely an interesting proof of concept running on those old blue Linksys boxes to what is today a practical and reliable tool for 21st century emergency communication support. Many of you in the audience are using this every day to support your local response agencies. Andre's leadership has allowed us to achieve one of the highest forms of recognition available to groups such as ours. We've won the Microwave Development Award from the American Radio Relay League twice, the last time in 2018, where the award was presented to the team at the 2019 Dayton Hamvention in Xenia, Ohio. And that's where we got this. And again, due to Andre's leadership. But he's not only just an excellent leader, he's a source of wonderful and useful and practical information. And I'd like to share a little bit of that with you in the hopes that if you haven't seen this before, you'll take this information to heart and put it to practical use. Now, Andre put a lot of effort and thought into providing guidance on how to select devices for use in an AREDN network that you might be planning or you might be planning to extend. And so he put together a spreadsheet that summarizes a lot of his hard gained knowledge over many years. and distilled it so it could make your device choices a lot easier and a lot more useful in the end, because you'd be selecting the right device for the right situation. And this spreadsheet is available on our website at ardenmesh.org. A forum member asked just this last week if, in addition to the Google Docs link that Andre had put up to the document, could we also make it available in some other forms so he wouldn't have to log on to Google to get the document. So I've, in response to that request, I posted it on our own website, and you can download the spreadsheet directly from us as well. So there's several ways of getting it. And the device selection spreadsheet has 4 parts. The first part is a list of all the devices that we support and all of their most important characteristics. What band they operate on, what types of antennas they have, if they're integrated or not, how much RAM and how much flash memory they have, what their maximum power output is, are they MIMO devices or not, and a variety of other characteristics that are too lengthy to list here, but you can look at them, you can select them, you can sort on each of the columns, so you can quickly find the types of device characteristics that might be most important to your planned deployment. And then you can narrow it down quickly. The next part of the device selection spreadsheet is giving you some ideas of what would be considered a suitable RF link, and how to put the how to use the calculations that you might use with a tool such as Radio Mobile or something else, so you can determine in advance whether you're likely to have a good deployment or not. So this is, again, advice that Andre's picked up and used successfully over many years, and is passing it along to the rest of us. The third part of the device selection spreadsheet is a look at expected path losses on various microwave frequency bands, 900 megahertz, 2.4 gig, 3.4 gig, and 5.8, and at various distances. Gives you an idea of the size of the Fresnel zone at on the various bands at various distances, as well as what is likely to be your maximum RF link distance at various bandwidths that you might select, 5, 10, or 20 megahertz bandwidth. Anyway, so the device selection spreadsheet is an important tool that all of us can use in planning. If you haven't seen it before, please download it, take a look at it, and I can assure you it'll improve your next deployment. And next up on our list is Daryl. Why is my, there we go. Daryl is not a boring guy, even though he's our tunnel manager. He's no Elon Musk, at least not yet, I got. Yeah, nice hat, Daryl. Daryl does a lot for the project. As I said, he's done the tunnel code. He manages also the virtual tunnel in the cloud, and manages the cloud facilities. He set up and maintains the development environment in the cloud and the Docker containers. He's over the recent years had over 250 commits to the project, and one of the more recent things that Daryl added in the way of features to the project are an alert function. It works in a couple of different ways. The two ways that it works is that we, the AREDN development team, we have the ability to post messages to your nodes if they have an internet connection, and your nodes will automatically retrieve any messages from us, alert messages from us every 12 hours. And there's two types of nodes that, two types of messages that could be created. One that's a general broadcast for all nodes, and one that's directed only to individual nodes. So a broadcast message might be something like, oh, let's say the project development team got notice that there was a very egregious security flaw in some of the underlying code, maybe that's supplied by OpenWRT, and it needed to be addressed right away, and we went ahead and put a new code release out. So we want to alert you that this is really important to pay attention to. You should download a particular nightly build to get your node updated, something like that perhaps. Now, a similar but more constrained version of the alerts is that nodes without internet access can also have the ability to display local alerts. And you set this up in the advanced configuration section we'll see in just a little bit. And this is where you can set up, let's say for your own local group, it might be just your town or your county, or some operational area that you're either managing or participating in. You might set up an alert server and send out maybe important weather information, or some other situational alert that needs to go out to node operators in your area. And so this is an example of how both types of alerts would look on your node if they came out. So the top part of it is an alert that would come from us, from the AREDN project team. And here we're alerting you that a new release is out. The bottom half of the yellow alert is something that you might have put together yourself. In this case, Steve, AB7PA, has sent out a weather alert to all nodes in his operational area, his local mesh out in Arizona. So this is something that you could do yourself. Again, you control that by making a configuration change in the advanced configuration section. So again, this is on the advanced configuration page. By the way, you can find this text and additional surrounding text with a bit more detail and a bit more explanation in our AREDN documentation. We'll talk about a little bit more about that in just a few minutes. So the point is too here is that with the AREDN team alert messages, as I said, it'll check once every 12 hours. But if you don't want those messages coming into you, even though your node is internet connected, you can leave that function turned off, save settings, and then you won't get you won't be bothered by us. Similarly, you can set up your own local messages. You can set up a repository, let's say on a Raspberry Pi or some other computer, and configure it so that you give it a URL where the message will be generated. And that's how you get your messages out. Sorry. losing control here. Anyway, so the alerts function is a new and useful feature that been added just over the last couple of months. Been tested out fairly thoroughly. It seems to work pretty well. We'd like to get your feedback on what you think of it, good, bad, or indifferent. And if you're actually using it in your local mesh, particularly the local alerts function for either an exercise or an actual response to an emergency, we would definitely like to hear about that. Get a little write-up, certainly posted on our website in the forum, possibly even give us an opportunity to work with you and write up an article for QST or some of the other ham magazines to explain how you're using that function. Next up, we have Joe Ayers, AE6xe. Joe's our RF expert. He's also an expert on really internet protocols, and specifically 802.11 variants. And he's going to give a presentation to all of you in a little while on how does the AREDN 802.11n signal maximize throughput. And I think you're going to find that interesting and informative. I know I intend to listen because Joe gave us a little bit of heads up a few days ago on what he's going to cover. It was all new and interesting information to me. So I know I'm going to learn a lot from listening to Joe, as I always do. Joe produces an awful lot of code. He's produced most of the recent nightly builds, certainly not all by a measure. You'll see other people have been contributing, but he does produce a lot of them. Some of the really recent stuff is he's been keeping up weekly, almost daily, with ever-changing microtik model strings for whatever reason. Every time they come out with a slightly new version, a variant of their firmware, they change the model strings on one or more of their hardware. And our community has alerted us to us, and Joe gets right on it and updates the code. He's also been instrumental in keeping the AREDN firmware aligned with the latest OpenWRT code. And that's important for a couple of reasons. The first is OpenWRT is literally supported by thousands of developers all around the world. And these are some high quality professional people. So they have a great deal of interest in keeping things secure and operating functionally very well, keeping it reliable. So all of the stuff that they do to increase security and reliability, we inherit in our base code. So if we're keeping up with them, we've got the best things possible. They've also upgraded to later versions of Linux that underlies their code. So again, we benefit from all of that. So it's important to keep up to date with their latest offerings. Joe's had over 200 commits to the project over the years. And one of the more recent things that he did in terms of adding a new feature is to enable access to an open API, a Wi-Fi open access point. And what does that mean? Well, and instead of what we've had to do up until just fairly recently is if you wanted internet access, you had to use a wired Ethernet connection to, let's say, connect to your local home mesh or local home LAN, and then through your internet service provider connect out to the internet. But of course, a lot of us, most of us, maybe all of us have Wi-Fi in the house too, and sometimes it's just inconvenient to run an Ethernet cable from your ISP's router to the node that you want to do, but you might be using a device like a MikroTik HAP AC Lite. And what you can do is use the 5 gig portion of the HAP AC Lite and use it to connect to one of your Wi-Fi access points, and thereby get an internet connection exactly the same way that you would connect a laptop or your smartphone or some other device that uses Wi-Fi in your home or in your office. You can connect some of the mesh-enabled devices to a Wi-Fi access point as well. The important thing to note is that when you make this choice and select the desire to connect it to a Wi-Fi access point, it disables the VLAN 1, so you can no longer use a physical cable to connect to the physical WAN port. So the important thing to remember here is it's either one or the other. You're going to get to the internet one way or the other, but you choose whether it's the traditional way with an Ethernet cable or the new way with Wi-Fi access. And here you can see on the configuration page, on the setup page, how you do it. You just, at the bottom of the little dialog box, you can enable the WAN Wi-Fi client and identify the SSID of the access point that you connect to, and whatever pre-shared key, whatever password you've set up to connect to it. So it's no more difficult than that. Let me introduce another member of the team, Steve, AB7PA, up until recently, formerly KC0EUW, I believe. Steve, among other things, manages the AREDN docs, the documentation. We've got over 160 pages now of very high quality documentation covering all sorts of topics you'll see in a minute. But even before we talk about the documentation, Steve produced 2 very important and very useful videos that I want you to be aware of. One is an AREDN video, overview video that's 17 minutes long, and the other is a 6-minute video on how to choose a radio for AREDN mesh networking. And I wanted to bring these to your attention because we get a lot of requests for introducing AREDN mesh networking to people all over. Various clubs we've done in person, we've done the Zoom presentations and so forth. We've shown people slide decks. And I think Steve's recent work with the YouTube video does everything we need to do to address the topics, to introduce mesh networking to an audience that's unfamiliar with it. And so I would strongly recommend, if you want to bring the topic up with your club or a local group, present Steve's videos, and that'll cover everything you need to know to get started. And then you can take a look at well, here's the little title slides from both of the videos. It's on YouTube. All you need to do is search YouTube for AB7PA, and they'll come right up. And please bookmark them. And if you like, give them a thumbs up as they ask on YouTube. But once you look at the overview, you get an idea of, well, what are the details? How do I really get this started? Look at the documentation on our website. At the top menu bar on the website, I believe it's the second menu item over, it says Docs. You can go click on that and you'll pull this page up. It's all neatly formatted. And on the left side here in the gray bar, you have some of the table of contents. You have an overview what the documentation is all about. And at the bottom there, bottom left, you may just barely be able to see it where it says read the docs and latest. Um, you can pull down a description, or you can pull down a copy of the entire documentation for you. We'll get to that in just a second. Take a look at all of the topics that are here in the documentation, not only how to get started and set up your equipment, but advice and guidance on how to set up not just a single node, but an actual network, some of the characteristics that you need to be aware of. Then most importantly, once you have a network up, what are you going to do with it? And of course, you should be putting some thought into that right from the beginning as well. What's motivating you to put up an AREDN high-speed network? What services do you think need to be offered? What do your served agencies require you to make available? And then there's a variety of how-to guides, tips to get you past some of the difficult parts that you may not have seen before, and some thoughts on how to keep things running well. As I'd said, at the bottom of that gray link, or gray bar at the left, at the very bottom it says read the docs, and then you see V colon latest, the version latest. And then if you look real carefully next to the latest, there's a little white down arrow that I've circled here in yellow. If you click on that, it'll bring up a real important menu. And the reason I wanted to show this to you is that many people didn't know this, or they've overlooked it, or didn't really see it. But this is very helpful, because when you click on that, you bring up the different versions of the document. So if you're looking for something earlier, if you're running on an earlier version of the firmware, and we hope you're not, but if you are, you can bring up documentation that just pertains to that doesn't contain all the latest features and functions. But more importantly, on the downloads, you can click on the downloads and download the entire 160 some pages as a single PDF document, and save it, and you can put it wherever you want it, print it off. You can download it as an HTML document or an EPUB document, or you can look at it from read the docs source and look at it. You can also view it on GitHub. And then finally, you can also search this document while you're online looking at it. So if you wanted to, again, look at the section that refers to the Wi-Fi access point that we just talked about, Joe enabling, you could search for Wi-Fi access point and pull up that section and get all the latest information on that. So that's an important way of getting at the documentation. I'd like to introduce you to another member of the team, Eric, KG6WXC. He's the author and maintainer of the popular mesh map that many of you have seen. Some are you using for your regional deployments. I know that I've seen them from Oregon and Southwest Ohio and Southern California, a variety of other places that are using it. Eric has several dozen commits to the project. One of the recent things that he added was the ability to create aliases for host names. And these DNS aliases provide a way for you to create a synonym for a particular computer. And the concept would be useful if you wanted to create a device on your node's LAN network to be identified by something other than the actual host name. And you should prefix this with your call sign in order to maintain the convention of keeping every host name unique. And where you implement this very simply is on the port forwarding page in the setup, port forwarding, DHCP address reservation, and advertised services page. So there's a new entry in the later code, in the latest code, down at the bottom right for DNS aliases that you can set up there. So it's really quite simple to do. A couple of things to be aware of when your node's using direct mode for its LAN, which is pretty much the default, the normal way you'd be using it. You'll be enabling functionality that's very similar to if you had created a DNS CNAME record. So it'll be your computer or your device will be reachable by an alias from other nodes and other parts of the network that's connected to your node and your device. And so it becomes available also through advertised services. Alternatively, if you're using NAT mode, that alias is not propagated across the mesh, but it is available within your local LAN on that node. So anyway, it's a new feature that many will find useful. Also, if you've created any aliases, they'll be displayed in the light orange color on your node's local hosts column. So they'll be distinguishable from all the other information that you're normally seeing. Let me introduce Andrew, KK4ZUZ. Andrew's a real important guy, possibly more important to people outside of North America because Andrew keeps up all of our TP-Link code up to date, and that's his specialty. And TP-Link devices are very popular, more popular in Europe and Australia, and I believe New Zealand as well, than they are generally in North America. But there are some folks in North America using TP-Link devices. I've seen a few, and you can check out the AREDN mesh map and probably find a few, but they are more popular elsewhere. And so we have Andrew to thank for keeping stuff up to date there. There are about a dozen TP-Link devices, and over the last year or so, there have been fairly, I wouldn't say frequent, but fairly steady number of changes and improvements to TP-Link. So Andrew has been kept busy, and we're grateful that he supports this important manufacturer to the mix of manufacturers that the project supports. Finally, there's me. I'm Randy, Whiskey Uniform 2 Sierra. I maintain the AREDNmesh.org website. On behalf of the project, we've taken pains to make sure that the website is as high quality and professional looking as possible. We're running this website on a professionally hosted site. This is not running on some old Pentium in my basement somewhere. It's also not running on a $15 a month bare Linux server out in somebody's data center somewhere. This is a fully professional, fully supported website that offers a lot of professional functions like automatic backups and security features and functions and a variety of protections and a lot of maintenance features that keep things simple for us as the end users. This also enables us to present a lot of views. So we're getting 5,000 to 8,000 page views a week on the website, and we're sending out over 40,000 emails monthly. So this isn't cheap to do. On the other hand, we right from the beginning we wanted to do really a professional quality job of the project and make sure that our community had the best possible access to what we're producing. So we felt this is a way that was justified by our overall goals. I also manage the project's finances and administration. And I want to say on behalf of the team, I'm very grateful to those of you who have contributed to the project's financial support. As I said, none of this stuff is cheap, but there are a number of people that have contributed, many on a recurring basis, and we're grateful for their continuing support. We've got also a fairly lengthy list of other contributors that I'm not going to take the time to mention now, but there are over a dozen. If you'd like to see who they are and what contributions that they've made, please see our GitHub repository for the details. Again, that's open to all. We are an open source project. I also want us to remember the dozens of people who have identified new feature requests or potential bugs, and that keeps us going. Everybody that's on this call, and all of your friends, any of you can contribute to the project, whether you have the ability to provide code or not, but you can identify things that should be added to the AREDN firmware. You can identify um, some features or functions that you think are not operating correctly or appear to be broken, or you don't understand how they're supposed to work, or you have a better way of having them work and provide a function. Please get all of that to us. And again, use GitHub to uh, put in your requests or identify the issues. You'll have to sign up uh, for GitHub, set up a user account. It is free to do that. But if you do that, then you'll help us help you uh, keep the project moving forward as we have. Again, we've been extremely active. There is not a week that goes by that something hasn't been added to the project. And talk very briefly about some of the feature requests that have come in for changes in addition to the feature requests that have already been addressed that I just previously mentioned. There's an open request for enabling the 5 gigahertz band for mesh on the MikroTik app AC light. And this requires the 802.11ac drivers, which we don't have yet. And Joe Aes6xe is having conversations with people that may be able to get us down that road. There's, in addition to being some interesting and challenging firmware development, it may also require the purchase of um, or access to some proprietary software. So we're not sure about that. If it does, uh, that may become a financial burden to us. So we're going to have to pursue this carefully and deliberately to see if we can do it. We do know that the 802.11ac devices are gaining ascendancy in the market. The 802.11n, N as in Nancy devices that we're all currently using successfully, uh, are becoming less attractive to the market. They're becoming slowly but steadily the last generation. So there are fewer and fewer new 802.11 devices available for purchase. But as the wireless internet service providers transition to the 11 AC devices, we'll probably see a flurry of 802.11n devices on the used market. So you may want to look for that, and we'll keep those running. They'll work for a long time to come. There's a feature request for an additional field for a contact email in the code. Oops, sorry. That we haven't started yet, but it's out there. Again, you can go to the GitHub site and see all of the requests for enhancements and all the other types of things, whether they're open or closed. So again, I recommend getting familiar with GitHub. There's a request for an OLSR broadcast horizon enhancement based on the ETX, and there's been discussions of this off and on over some time. It hasn't been a real high priority, but it's still on the boards as an open request. And the idea here is to set some sort of artificial horizon, if you will, where the host names would not propagate across a large interconnected mesh beyond some threshold. And how that threshold gets defined is one of the things that's under discussion. There was a request, another example as an enhancement request for putting a text message on a node, on the node's homepage whenever new firmware is available. To some extent, that new alert function that Daryl recently committed may well address this particular request. And again, use GitHub if you have more ideas for features that you'd like to see. Let me talk for a moment about nightly builds. We call them nightly builds. That doesn't mean that every night, 7 days a week, that there's a new update, but pretty much every week, there's probably not a week that goes by that there isn't at least one update to the code. And sometimes, some weeks there are more than one. So again, you'd want to check that on our available software page for nightly builds to see what's available. And keep in mind that this is where the latest bug fixes, the newest feature enhancement are available. Support for new hardware perhaps are available. And if we look at the last year and a half, 2 years, so between September 2018 and October 2019, over the course of that year, there were 114 changes put into the code. Some were new features, some were bug fixes, some were new hardware, the whole variety of things. And then following on that, between October last year and this past spring, there were, again, a whole bunch of additional changes, 16 bug fixes, 27 new features, 14 device changes. And since March, I don't have the exact count, but it would be somewhat similar to this. Again, based on all the things I just told you, you can see we've moved ahead. So even though we're not calling the nightly builds the latest stable version, it does not mean that the nightly builds are themselves unstable. That means that they may not have been as thoroughly and as widely tested as the latest stable version. But if you're looking for some of the new features, or you want to help us validate that in fact the newest things we put are in fact stable and bug-free. Please pull down the nightly builds and upgrade your nodes and give them a try. And we're pretty sure that you're going to like what you see there. Again, we're responding to the community. We don't dream up all this stuff just on our own. All the feature requests and bug alerts really come from people just like you, and that's who we're working to serve. So we improve and evolve every week. Um, oh, yeah, I did count something. So there were 7 bugs fixed since April, according to what I read in our GitHub repository. The one feature request where we've extended an additional 2 channels on the 5 gig um, band, excuse me, and we've added the ability to hide local hosts on the mesh status page to remove some of the clutter. So a couple of feature requests and a little more than a half dozen bug fixes. So things improve. This is a slide that many of you probably seen at any one of our presentations. Just a reminder that we're providing access to that still at the moment 4 bands in the microwave spectrum, many of which exclusive Part 97 channels. You can upgrade firmware over the air. You don't have to be physically present at a lot of your remote nodes. You have very high data rates available. The equipment that we're supporting doesn't require a lot of money to get started. You can deploy and implement these things fairly rapidly. And again, with the help of our extensive and profusely illustrated documentation to make it easy to do. Multiple antenna choices let you set up a very versatile network. Again, using Andre's device selection spreadsheet, you can make really well-informed choices about your antennas and your RF links with that guidance. Certainly everything we do interfaces very easily with any other internet capable devices. And remember, we're supporting over 70 devices from 4 different manufacturers. So there's a great deal of device and manufacturer diversity. So we're making sure that your investment does not go obsolete. Just looking back in the not too distant past from the spring, a reminder, things that were added this past spring. We upgraded to the latest version of OpenWRT with all of its inherent improvements. We've added the auto distance setting. Again, read the documentation on how and why that works the way it does. We've added contact information and comments for tunnel connections. We've reduced the visual clutter on the status page, and we've updated the help information for passive Wi-Fi scan updates. We've added the OLSR restart option. I talked about the Wi-Fi client. We've added new sysinfo JSON changes where you can get all the details about how your node is configured and pull that into a single file. And we've improved the SNR data. Again, a reminder, all of the change history about everything that we've done is available on GitHub. So I thank you for your attention. I want to remind you that we think we're at the center of emergency preparedness, and we want to help you support your local served agencies. Big thank you to all of you for your attention from all of the AREDN project team. I'm Randy Smith, and we'll put it back to Orv. Take it away, Orv.